days.
With Tim Burton's Beetlejuice 2 taking the world by storm, what better time than now to divulge into other forms of media the bio-exorcist has dominated with his quirky antics? While a lot of you guys have probably heard of the Beetlejuice animated TV show that was once a popular children's cartoon, there was also a continuation of this into a comic series published by Harvey Comics in 1991 as a tie-in with the cartoon. It kept the tone light and comedic, with the main characters Beetlejuice and Lydia Deetz as best friends who go on various adventures in both the Neitherworld and the real world. Now we have 4 whole comics that document Lydia and Beetlejuice's fun conversations, crazy trips, and of course, the slapstick ghoulish punchlines that never cease to be hilarious. With that being said, let's not waste any more time and explore some of the most mind-blowing Beetlejuice comic plots in detail. But before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
Like a little privacy.
Beetlejuice, 1991 comic. So this comic series has 2 issues, with the first issue being divided into 2 individual storylines. Let's start strong with the first story of the first Beetlejuice issue. Every mind-blowing Beetlejuice story beyond the movies explored. This is your lice. The comic begins in a quiet village somewhere in New England, where Lydia Deetz lives with her father Charles and her stepmother Delia in a beautiful house. Even though Lydia is a weird teenager, she's never bored or lonely because she has Beetlejuice, her best friend from the Neitherworld. Beetlejuice tells Lydia how many guys have calling cards, so he has conjured up some electric eels to make a crawling card. While that sounds quite funny, things kinda get stuffy when these eels try to bite Lydia, absolutely grossing her out for the first time. After Beetlejuice gets rid of them, he pulls out his real calling card made out of the dirt from his toenails and shows it to Lydia, who finds it totally radical. Although she does mention how the calling card is useless for her because all Lydia had to do was call his name 3 times and Beetlejuice would come visit her. Lydia then gets called by her stepmom, so she leaves Beetlejuice to meet Delia. She then meets a new designer named Foster T. Farnsworth, who is apparently a jewelry designer and a good friend of her stepmom. Even though Delia tells him that Lydia is only into weird stuff, Foster shows her just the right assortment of jewelry suited to her unusual taste. He then pulls out a silver spider pendant, and Lydia, awed by the unusualness of it, tries to have a closer look. But soon the jewelry designer turns out to be a high-profile hypnotist hired by Delia to fix her weird stepdaughter and change her to become normal. As Foster starts swinging the silver spider pendant to and fro, Lydia becomes tranced by it. Just then, he commands her to behave like a normal teenager and despise anything that is strange or bizarre. Somehow it seems to work, because Lydia starts to behave like a typical 13-year-old, talking about how adorable she finds all the hunky-dory boys in her class. Meanwhile, Delia is elated to finally have a normal teen daughter, and thanks Foster for a job well done. Little does she know, this guy was extorting her because the hypnotism won't last forever, which means there are many more expensive sessions that Lydia would have to go through in order to remain a normal girl. Now, Lydia becoming an average teenager is surely her family's dream, as she spends most of her day doing normal kid stuff and even talks about boys on the phone with other girls of her class. Sadly, Beetlejuice is not looking forward to this version of her. When Lydia finds his calling card lying on the floor, she picks it up and calls out his name 3 times without understanding what it really means. Beetlejuice shows up while taking a slime bath and blames Lydia for her odd timing. Unfortunately, the hypnotism has wiped off Lydia's brain of anything strange or unusual, so seeing a random ghoul taking a slime bath in her bedroom while scrubbing himself with a frog leaves her mortified. Naturally, Beetlejuice is confused about Lydia being scared of him and asking him to leave. At first, he thinks she hates the pooper scooper essence he uses as his aftershave, but later he overhears Delia singing praises about how the hypnotist had turned Lydia into a normal girl. This truly breaks Beetlejuice into literal pieces, so he decides to go back to the Neitherworld and cry his eyes out. Later, while he laments over the loss of his one true friend, Lydia calls out Beetlejuice 3 times in her sleep. The demon is jumping with joy because he thinks Lydia has finally remembered her sidekick, but sadly, she was just talking in her sleep. Luckily, Beetlejuice has a plan. He decides to take Lydia for a good old trip to the Neitherworld while she thinks she is dreaming. Upon arriving at the Neitherworld, Lydia starts to believe that she is in a nightmare, but Beetlejuice calms her down to the mummery for a quick trip down to the mummery lane. Now, a mummery is a place where the records of everyone's past life is archived, almost like a library, but according to Beetlejuice, it's twice as boring. He then pulls out a book with the title, This Is Your Lice. It's clearly a parody on This Is Your Life, given that it has Lydia's face on it. After chomping down on lice and sifting through the scraps, Beetlejuice pulls out one of Lydia's happy memories of him when they were having a picnic at the Neitherworld Park. Suddenly, she remembers the picnic and talks about how Beetlejuice had brought live beetles to the picnic and turned it into a puke-nick. In response, he dismissed that memory and pulled out another one, where they visited the roller toaster together, but even that ended horribly as Lydia almost got burnt out. Although in BJ's defense, it was a roller toaster, so it was supposed to get her lightly toasted on a huge toaster. He then talks about how he took her to the movies on her last birthday. Only it was a movie that Lydia never got to watch, given that she was literally strapped onto a seat and moved aggressively. When Lydia expressed how she was grossed out by these memories, it further broke BJ's heart, driving him to hang his head in sorrow. But he was stopped by Lydia when she remembered how she enjoyed all their times together simply because they really loved each other's company. Seems like Lydia's back to normal now, huh? Well, not for long, because on the very next day, Foster the hypnotist came back with his crafty silver spider to put Lydia back into a trance. But this time when he tries to hypnotize her, Beetlejuice appears in front of him in the form of a ginormous spider and scares the living shit out of him. When Foster tries to start his car, suddenly it turns into Beetlejuice, only in a car form, which further scares the man and forces him to make a run for his life. At the end, Lydia thanks her best friend and assures him that she would never let anyone ever change her again. Scuzzo. In another morning in the Deetz house, Lydia screams at Beetlejuice from her window while he tries to pull a worm out of the ground with his mouth in his bird form and quarrels with another bird, screeching at him for stealing its meal. Things don't exactly go well for him when he falls on the ground while pulling the worm out, and the bird takes this chance to fly away with his food. This makes our demon very sad, because Neitherworld was out of his favorite breakfast, an Egg McMaggot, so he was really looking forward to that worm. But soon all's right with him when Beetlejuice stumbles upon a caterpillar, which is just as good as a worm. Although he is shushed by Lydia, who overhears a conversation her father has with the mailman. Apparently, Charles can't afford to repair the old place anymore, and unless he can come up with some extra cash, he would have to move their things somewhere else. Now, Lydia thinks that they would have to move away, and the thought of staying away from her really scares Beetlejuice. So, as a solution, he takes her to the Neitherworld to play Scuzzo, the afterlife lottery game with prize money of $50 billion. Given it was the quickest way for them to get rich, Beetlejuice and Lydia decide to try their luck and buy a ticket. Unfortunately, it looks like the entire Neitherworld has lined up to buy a ticket to the lottery, so Beetlejuice decides to cut the crowd by pulling Lydia right in front of the counter. When he's stopped by the dumb ghoul who is first in line, Beetlejuice practically gaslights him by making him believe that he was facing the wrong side of the line all this while, because apparently they were standing at the back of the line. Thinking that the tickets were being sold on the other end, the dumb ghoul runs to what he thinks to be the front end of the line, thus freeing up space for them. Lydia then gets herself a ticket for $1. While Beetlejuice believes that the 131313 number on a ticket is lucky enough to make them win, Lydia still feels hopeless at the odds of winning amongst millions. But our favorite demon certainly has a hunch and assures Lydia before leaving on some business. Later, while she was chilling at BJ's Roadhouse, she sees an advertisement by Lucky Lucifers, Yes, the literal devil, who is apparently looking for some volunteers to help him keep the fires going and was offering the deal of a devil in exchange for a few thousand years of life. Pyramid scheme, of course. Anyways, when the show turns back on, the Scuzzo winning number is announced, and unsurprisingly enough, Lydia wins. She literally does a happy dance at the thought of not having to move away, but that's interrupted by a knock at the door. Turns out it is the devil, literally knocking at the door while holding a contract in Beetlejuice's name. Apparently, BJ had agreed to work for the devil for 2,000 years if his Scuzzo ticket number won. Now, Lucifer was here to collect his dues, but Lydia dismissed his contract and tore it up. Because she bought the ticket with her own money and never made a deal with him, it fully nullifies the contract. Plus, Lydia is smart enough to know what buttons to push in her favor and asks Lucifer if he was really looking forward to dealing with Beetlejuice for 2,000 years. Scared of living a hellish life with Beetlejuice at his disposal, the devil agrees to her and goes on his way. But with the deal being off, Beetlejuice goes into panic mode and scolds Lydia for throwing away $50 billion. Of course, Lydia was not having any of it, as she refused to win dishonestly, even if Beetlejuice had his heart in the right place. Luckily, on the next day, she calls for him again and squeals with joy because apparently it was just a confusion. Charles was thinking of moving the things from their old storage shed into the backyard, so Lydia never had to move in the first place. While that's great and all for Beetlejuice, he squeamishly tells her how he put back the ripped ticket together and collected the $50 billion. Unfortunately, it was not $50 billion, but 50 billion cartons of Egg McMaggots. Good for him, though. Who wouldn't like to win an endless breakfast for all of eternity, am I right? Beetlejuice issue number 2. Alcatraz Island. The second issue of the comic begins with Lydia catching up on the daily news of the Neitherworld in the Daily Heave. It shocks her to see a photo of Beetlejuice chomping on crisp roaches, right on the front page with a big headline praising him for saving the Neitherworld from the cleanup gang and helping the cops catch his brother Donnie Juice, who is apparently the mastermind behind the entire gang. Apparently Donnie Boy is on trial tomorrow and will soon be banished to Sandworm Land. But Lydia finds the whole story bizarre because apparently a gang of evil cleaning equipments tried to clean up Neitherworld until Beetlejuice took matters into his own hands by transforming himself into an octopus and using his tentacles to stop the entire gang. The most surprising thing was that the gang leader, Big Squirt, was actually his own brother Donnie Juice, who was apparently a very nice guy. So orchestrating something so huge was very out of character for him. To get to the truth of the matter, Lydia calls out for Beetlejuice, who has turned into a flea to save himself from the autograph hounds. As it turns out, the thought of being treated like a hero is grossing out Beetlejuice, and the fact that his brother took his title of being the family slimeball is pissing him off. But Lydia assures him that Donnie Juice was too nice to be a criminal and must have a good reason to break the law. After convincing Beetlejuice to get to the core of the issue, they travel to the Neitherworld, where people are literally worshipping him as a hero. While BJ complains how the new fame is ruining his reputation, Lydia reminds him to take a stand for Donnie Juice. Meanwhile, at the Neitherworld Court of Justice, Donnie has been declared as guilty for trying to clean the Neitherworld and is being shipped to Sandworm Land by the judge. Now, Donnie just looks like a swell guy in a bow tie. I mean, in his last words, he literally thanks the jury for passing a quick judgment. He even thanks the cops for his shiny new handcuffs and ends his speech by thanking the judge for sending him to Sandworm Land. The judge is shocked to hear that he wants to go to Sandworm Land because apparently Donnie loved sandworms as a child and even had a pet sandworm named Cuddles. He loses his mind in rage and orders to open the trap door, calling Donnie Juice to fall into it. Fortunately, Beetlejuice arrives just in time to catch Donnie from falling into the trap door, while Lydia tries to hold his feet on the ledge. One little slip and they all tumble down into a vat of black oil. Here they are greeted by 3 grumpy security officers who welcomed them to Alcatraz Island, the place where the Neitherworld's crudest animals are sent in for 1,000 years. Even though Lydia tries to tell them the reality of the situation, the security ghoul shuts her up by saying that everyone in Oilcatraz Island is a prisoner because nobody has ever managed to escape it. So Beetlejuice takes this up as a challenge and starts trying to plan an escape. He turns himself into an armored tank and blows off a wall for them to escape. But sadly, the plan ends up in a rut when the gang lands up in a sea of oil. Later, inside the jail, Beetlejuice complains to Lydia about not wanting to spend 1 billion years inside a cell with his bonehead brother, who's busy admiring the lovely shade of gray on the prison walls, which is apparently just the sight he needs to practice his poetry. Lydia then asks how a sweet man like Donnie ended up in prison, and that's when we get to know that one day while taking a clean bath and sifting through job ads, he found a listing that wanted a cleaning manager at Squirter Incorporated. Although Donnie didn't see the guy who hired him, he did see his very nice shadow and thanked him for the job. He was given the title of the Big Squirt, and all Donnie had to do was leave the company business card wherever there had been a cleanup. But all that came to an end when the cops caught him, and being the simpleton he is, my man Donnie here believes that he was prisoned for not doing his job well. But Lydia assures him that Donnie had done a great job and was being set up by the man who hired him to take the blame in case something went wrong with his plan. When Lydia asks Beetlejuice to help them break out and prove his brother's innocence, they get called for lunch. Upon arriving at the Oilcatraz cafeteria, they see a bunch of inmates coughing at the sight of the oily food. While Lydia and Beetlejuice almost throw up at the sight of their peanut butter and petroleum jelly sandwich, Donnie appreciates the distinct taste of his lube lump souffle. Beetlejuice, having had enough, plans to start a riot and escape during the confusion. So he starts a fight with a monster who has a Frankenstein-like face, and soon a food fight breaks out, allowing them to escape. Upon finding an open door, they take the last chopper out of the prison, but unfortunately, this chopper doesn't have rotor blades. Instead, it chops through the ground into a cavern and takes them to the deepest bowels of Oilcatraz Island. The prisoners here are all assigned to the drill team, where they drill for oil all day and night without any rest. When the gang are forced to drill, Lydia loses all hope of making it back home, while Beetlejuice complains about being exhausted. Donnie, on the other hand, keeps on drilling while humming to himself. When he gets too dangerously close to the pipe, the security yells at him to get away from it, but Donnie can't hear a word from all the drilling noise and continues to hum his woes away. Soon, Beetlejuice finds out that the main pipeline pumps oil from the ground to the surface, so even a little hole can be dangerous when oil comes gushing up the pipe. Hearing this, the demon has a literal brainstorm with his brain storming out of his skull, giving him the idea of a 1-minute power play. Turning his nose into a hacksaw, Beetlejuice carves a huge hole into the pipe before dragging Donnie and Lydia along. In a second, the oil gushes up, with the air pressure pushing them upwards. When Lydia worries about being outraced by the gusher, Beetlejuice transforms into the bird brain of Oilcatraz and outraces the oil gush to escape from the island. Looks like they are indeed the first Oilcatraz prisoners to get home after all. Beetlejuice in the Neitherworld, 1991. The Neitherworld Beauty Contest. When Beetlejuice pops up on Lydia's mirror to do a little reflecting, he reminisces about the time when the Deetzes moved into the old haunted house. At first he thought of sawing them in half, but once Lydia caught his attention, Beetlejuice tried his best to scare the daylights out of her. In response, Lydia did nothing but laugh, and soon they became snug as bugs in a rug. Now, Lydia is a stealthy girl. She knew BJ was up to something again, and after a bit of pressing, the ghoul finally confesses that he signed her up for the Miss Neitherworld beauty pageant, which reserves a hefty prize money for the winner. Of course, Lydia is not interested. She's appalled that Beetlejuice would sign her up without even asking her, and while going on an angry rant, Beetlejuice tricks her into saying his name 3 times, thus transporting them to the Neitherworld. They end up in the middle of the boardwalk in the catatonic city, where Beetlejuice turns himself into a joyride and takes Lydia to the beauty show. Once they reach the convention center, he drags her inside to simply eyeball the contestants. only to be met by an assortment of the most bizarre freaks. But Lydia was not having any of it, so she shut BJ up and told him she wouldn't participate. Next thing we know, the Split Woman, who has been a recurring character in the movies and the cartoon, shows up as a contestant and asks Lydia to scram, because no scrawny little mortal can stop her from winning. Although being kicked across the room really hurt Lydia's ego, and she decides to swipe the beauty pageant under the stuck-up nose of the nasty woman and goes on to sign herself up at the desk. Loving the turnaround, Beetlejuice starts dressing Lydia for the swimsuit competition, and they finally settle on a red swimsuit for her, especially because it has a picture of Beetlejuice on it. Once the unusual judges are announced and all the bizarre participants line up on stage, the show begins. Beetlejuice roars for Lydia from the audience while they all introduce the contestants. Overhearing the judges leaning towards favoring his friend, BJ starts cheering with pom-poms. Later, when Lydia is confused about what to showcase for the talent portion of the show, Beetlejuice has a brainstorm and pops himself into a boiling cauldron. Somehow, he has boiled down the competition into a two-woman race between Lydia and Split Lady. He then transforms into a baton that Lydia carries backstage while the Split Woman juggles and tap dances on stage to get some pretty impressive scores. But you don't see a baton twirling tap dancer every day, do you? Well, that's what Lydia does. Using BJ as her baton, she twirls along with the crowd while singing the limbo. 13 encores later, the judges crown Lydia as the new Miss Neitherworld. Unfortunately, the crown doesn't stay on for long, as the Split Woman barges in objecting to the decision and demands a fair recount. She points out how Lydia should be disqualified for breaking the rules by having Beetlejuice on the stage with her. Within a split second, the judges snatch the winning mantle from Lydia and give it to the mean Split Woman. Seeing the prize money leave his hands, Beetlejuice turns into a big crybaby and hobbles, but Lydia calms him and gives him the runners-up trophy before taking them home. Back at home, Lydia talks about the plenty of fun she had, but BJ starts planning to overthrow the Split Woman from fulfilling her duties, which would automatically pass her prize to the first runner-up. But Lydia shuns down his plotting and assures him that they would win fair and square next time. The story ends as BJ starts prepping Lydia for the next pageant that is supposed to be held 50 years from now. When he gives her a more organic look by dressing her in a bug-ridden swimsuit, Lydia finds herself questioning her big mouth. Where the ghouls are. The story opens as Beetlejuice comes to visit Lydia, only to find her busy getting ready to spend an afternoon at the beach with her family. Although BJ insists she takes him along, Lydia alerts him that she cannot expose him to the public, and there's no place more exposed than the seashore. Even though it shatters our ghoul, there's nothing Lydia can do about it, and when her stepmother calls her down, she bids him bye and leaves. Of course, she had forgotten her sunscreen, so Lydia came back to grab a bottle. But now, Beetlejuice had turned himself into a bottle of sunscreen, which Lydia casually picks up before leaving for the beach. After the Deetzes reach the beach and set up their space, Lydia goes into the locker room to change into her pink bathing suit. Beetlejuice takes this opportunity to pop himself out of the bag, leaving Lydia shocked. She gets worried about him getting seen in the ladies' bathhouse, but still cuts him some slack, allowing them to make the best out of it. They come up with a plan which involves Beetlejuice disguising himself as a beach ball to make sure he doesn't get caught by Charles and Delia. Unfortunately, he gets kicked around quite a bit to keep up with the ruse. After a hot and heavy match with the Beetlejuice beach ball, Delia and Charles go off for a swim in the ocean, finally allowing poor BJ to take a moment to breathe. When they sit quietly and admire the beach, Lydia sees a dorsal fin heading towards the swimmers. She then says Beetlejuice's name 3 times to release him out of his promise of not being seen by others, and soon the ghoul transforms himself into a funky-looking superhero named Beetleman. While everyone believes it to be some kind of PR stunt, Beetleman swoops in to take the shark out of the water and get one-on-one with him. A few puns and punches later, Beetleman rises out in the sky with a battered shark in hand. He then puts on a show for his spectators, and after bidding them farewell, he takes the shark away with him to sell it to a loan shark. At the end of the day, when Lydia finally comes back home, she is welcomed home by Beetleman, who just finished his fish dinner. Hoping to have a scoop on his heroism from earlier in the day, BJ asks Lydia if he's made it to the lead story of every newscast of the day. Unfortunately, nobody even thought of it, because after he flew away, everyone believed the entire thing to be some sort of promotional scam by the local seafood restaurant, especially because of his silly costume. The comic ends as Beetlejuice goes back to his classic black and white striped form, cracking up Lydia and her mirror. Beetlejuice Horror Day Special, 1992. This issue was released by Harvey Comics as a parody on the Christmas holiday special and is again divided into two different stories. Let's start with Michael Gallagher and Dave Mannix. Get Me to the Church on Slime. The comic begins with a bummed Lydia who has received Christmas presents and cards from everyone except from Beetlejuice. She was really holding out hope to get at least a card, given that it was the holiday season, when people of the world and the Neitherworld are kind to one another. Lydia is rightly offended at Beetlejuice, especially because he had the audacity to take his only friend for granted, as everyone else simply hates him. She then comes across an envelope inside her stocking, hung on the fireplace mantel, and notices that it is sealed with a beetle. Ironically, it's a wedding invitation designated to Lydia, who is in disbelief after getting to know about Beetlejuice's wedding through an ill-written card. So she calls his name 3 times in order to find out the truth, and is shocked to see Beetlejuice dressed like a groom, in white tie and tails. And by that, I mean there were literal tails of an alligator, a rattlesnake, a wolf, a lizard, and the devil bulging out of his ass. Soon we find out that the ghoul is super sad, and he's suffering the consequences of a prank gone wrong. While he was conducting his pre-holiday antics in the panty raid at the all-ghouls school, little did he know the girls had all been tipped off and were waiting in ambush to stink bomb him with rotten sandworm eggs. While he ran to escape the attack, Beetlejuice spat out his gum at the wenches and didn't realize the mistake until it hit one of the girls right on the face. And according to Neitherworld customs, if a guy hits chewed-up gum on a girl's face, he is bound to a shot gum wedding. Beetlejuice is pretty bummed about not having a single friend coming to his unwanted Christmas wedding, while his bride has a packed guest list. So Lydia agrees to be a good friend and attend Beetlejuice's ghoulish wedding as his best woman. After reaching the Neitherworld, they arrive right in the middle of a surprise bachelor party organized by every ghoul, goblin, and gonzo that has ever been ripped off, swindled, or sold out by Beetlejuice. Apparently, they were here to bury the hatchet and were willing to forgive BJ in the hope that a good woman would change him, or at least his socks. So they begin partying by playing a boogie record of cryptic Christmas carols and carry Beetlejuice in a cushioned coffin in the Neitherworld tradition of a "till death do us" party, while singing "for he's a smelly mold fellow." They really went all out with the puns here, huh? Anyways, after a banger party comes the doomed wedding morning, where a hungover Beetlejuice has literally hanged himself from the grief of being forced to be a husband. Apparently, his fiancée's father wants him to work a graveyard shift in the family business, and the thought of working makes Beetlejuice transform into a crocodile to cry out crocodile tears. Plus, he has never even seen this woman. He has no idea what his bride looked like behind the gum stuck on her face. But Lydia somehow consoles him and drags Beetlejuice to the chapel. Right outside, his would-be wife sat on a pile of toasters that came as a gift for their wedding and screamed at Beetlejuice, calling him a low-down rat for not helping her with the thank you notes. The woman is so mean and abusive to the ghoul that it gets Lydia worried about him. But she still tags along with him to the altar, where the minister begins to officiate the wedding by introducing Beetlejuice in 1,000 colorful adjectives of all things ghoulish. When he asks if anyone would want to object to the wedding, Lydia speaks up about the ridiculously obvious predicament of the situation, where neither Beetlejuice nor his fiancée wants to get married, as they clearly do not love each other. Although Lydia believed that it was her flawless logic that had stunned the crowd into silence, it was actually them being shocked about someone publicly admitting to being friends with Beetlejuice. Still, the minister ignores her objection, so an enraged Lydia yanks the gum stuck to the girl's face and eliminates the whole issue that obligates Beetlejuice to get married in the first place. While the crowd is bummed about not being able to get wrapped in the wedding sappiness, Beetlejuice is jumping for joy and kisses Lydia for saving his Lydia's afterlife. While the peck on the cheek sort of makes Lydia sick, she is somehow very happy to realize that Beetlejuice did not forget her Christmas gift. The story ends with the demon pulling out an old, dusty, and tattered t-shirt as Lydia's present, which leaves them both coughing like a tuberculosis patient. Never a dull moment. Beetlejuice is looking through his closet and asking Jacques, the bodybuilding skeleton, to help him find the perfectly gross birthday gift for Lydia. When he pulls out a pair of his old sweat socks, even Jacques runs away in horror, which makes it obvious for Beetlejuice that maybe it's not a great idea after all. And Lydia is his best pal, so of course she deserves something really gross. Beetlejuice finally finds the right gift after seeing a really gross doll commercial on the TV. She is sticky, she is icky, and she is sure to make you sicky, because she is Barfy, the grossest doll in town. Believing it's the perfect gift for Lydia, Beetlejuice hops over to Toys R Us, only to find out that every mummy and daddy in the neighborhood is buying a Barfy for their little brat. Nothing is left on the shelves but slime, but after looking for a minute, Beetlejuice finds one last doll. But just as he grabs it, a witch doctor in an ugly mask grabs it. Both of them start fighting over the doll, pulling it on both ends. But Beetlejuice gets the upper hand by literally transforming into a ginormous purple hand and slamming the witch doctor to the ground. After he leaves the store to find an undertaker to get a great gift box, Beetlejuice suddenly starts feeling sick and starts screaming in pain. Turns out, the witch doctor has specially made a Beetlejuice voodoo doll and used it to stick pins into him. Once the ghoul is down, the witch takes the Barfy and makes his way to the hut. Midway, the witch doctor is stopped by Bibi Joyce, who introduces herself as a representative of the Barfy Doll Company, but it's really just Beetlejuice in a new disguise. Miss Joyce here tells the witch doctor how everyone who owns a Barfy would want to have all the accessories to match the doll. The list includes a flea collar, Barfy's fly-swatting lollipop, her pet skunk, her puke bucket, her broken mirror, her outhouse, her truck, her garage, her boyfriend, her terrible friends, and her thousands of ratty dresses. Apparently, every item in the Barfy catalog is manufactured cheap but are sold at expensive rates, and one who owns a Barfy must own them all. Now, the list scares the living shit out of the simple witch doctor, who could barely buy the doll. So he gives the doll back to Beetlejuice and runs away in horror. While the ghoul rejoices in his win, he hears the cry of a baby witch doctor raving on about wanting a Barfy. Now, BJ thinks himself to be a tough guy, but the cries of a baby turns him into a sap, so he gives away the Barfy and even throws in all the elaborate list of accessories as free samples. The witch doctor, being taken aback by Beetlejuice's generosity, insists on repaying the kindness, which leaves the demon thinking about how he's going to get a doll for Lydia. Turns out, the witch doctor came through after all. Beetlejuice wishes Lydia a happy birthday with a wonderfully horrid doll, which turns out to be the same voodoo doll previously used by the doctor. Having loved her present, Lydia tightly hugs the Beetlejuice voodoo doll, which is apparently something the ghoul feels, and insists that she go easy on the squeezy. Now, how disturbingly cute is that, huh? So these were some of the most mind-blowing narratives we came across in the Beetlejuice comics. I still think the cartoon show managed to retain much more of the quirkiness of Beetlejuice's character as compared to the comics, but that's just my opinion, really. Now, have any of you ever read these comics? Which form of Beetlejuice media do you like the best? Let us know everything in the comment box below. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.